Gamers of the internet, I gotta level with you. Elden Ring is by far the game I play the most. I play it even more than addictive gambling simulators. I feel like there's a near endless amount of value to be gained from playing Elden Ring. I currently have 3 or 4 characters at different stages of progression that I'm bouncing between on any given day. You may call that crazy, but I just think it's fun. El Ringus Dingus is a game that I think I will play forever. Despite how much time I've put into replaying it, I'm not so sure it's even the most replayable Souls game. After giving it some consideration, I think that accolade might actually belong to Dark Souls 2. On its face, this seems like a completely ridiculous notion. Elden Ring is bigger, more open-ended, and filled with more gameplay mechanics. It's a much longer game to fully complete with way more bosses to fight and areas to explore. Surely all this extra content makes Elden Ring the de facto winner of this competition. On paper, it probably should, but in practice, I'm not actually so sure. I'd like to analyze both of these games today, and try to figure out which one actually deserves to be crowned most replayable Souls game. If that sounds like a good time to you, then please consider subscribing. Now, let's jump right in. Obviously, Elden Ring is fully open world. You can run to most of the entire map very quickly and get your mid to endgame build online without a whole lot of effort most of the time. While this seems like an obvious point in Elden Ring's favor, I think this is actually an aspect to Elden Ring that makes it less replayable. Sure, you can sprint directly to Altus Plateau and pick up the Anspur Rapier for your new Chlamydia build. But the journey to get there is incredibly dull. And I don't know if this is just a me problem, but by nature of getting to this endgame area, I mentally feel like I'm already done with all previous areas. Spending 20 minutes running with torrents to instantly reach the end of the mid-game totally fucks up the pacing for me. Compare this to how Dark Souls 2 approaches its progress through the early game. Just like in Elden Ring, Dark Souls 2 lets you make a beeline for any part of the game excluding some zones locked off until the end. For example, let's say you want the Moonlight Greatsword. Instead of spending 20 minutes doing mindless horseback sprinting, you have to kill several bosses and clear many challenging encounters. As a minimum, you have to kill Scorpioness Najka, Prowling Mangus, and the Duke's Dear Freya twice. Not to mention you have to contend with the Shaded Woods ghosts, the Laughing Curse Jars, and the nightmare fuel that is Seldora proper. Trying to get this weapon early doesn't really feel like cheating the way getting some weapons would in Elden Ring. You have to play through genuine combat and clear actual obstacles to get your reward. Sure, it's not going to be as fast as it would be in Elden Ring where you can just sprint on torrent, but it still doesn't take that long, and it feels a whole hell of a lot more rewarding. But the benefits don't just stop there.
Oh no!
In Dark Souls 2, you can put a lot of thought into the specific routes you take to get your items. If you want to be a hyper-nerd cartographer who meticulously plans out your exact pathing, you are rewarded for doing so. Using the Moonlight Greatsword as an example again, you first have to figure out a way to get past this petrified statue. You could type in those 4 wacky digits on the back of your credit card to just buy one for merchant tag Melentia, but maybe you want to save as much money as possible for leveling or for buying the battle pass. In which case, you might want to take a trip to the Feline Thrift Store and buy the much cheaper cat ring to grab the branch in the gutter. Or maybe you want to make an effort to grow in strength before ever setting out for Seldora. If that's the route you want to go, you might as well clear some starting zones and get access to the branches in No Man's Wharf or the Lost Bastille. In my opinion, taking time to plan out exactly how you want to proceed through the game adds a ton of fun. Making a new character is possibly the best part of these earlier Souls games for me. But in Elden Ring, the start of the game is kind of tedious. I feel obligated to go collecting these golden seeds, sacred tears, and runes from graveyards. Making direct beelines to collect these things isn't especially fun to do in Elden Ring. A friend of mine even calls this stuff doing your Elden chores, and I'm fairly certain that's not a compliment. So much of a fresh save starts out with you cosplaying as a centaur on Torrent. So yeah, Dark Souls 2 has a much more engaging early game for me. Even though it is more limited, that limitation actually breeds more fun. Of course, there is obviously a lot more to how replayable a game is than just the opening hours. In fact, for RPGs like this, most of the gameplay comes after already being set up somewhat. And I think this is the aspect where Elden Ring's replayability really pulls ahead. There's an absolute shitload of content to play through in Elden Ring. If you suffer from decision paralysis, Elden Ring is probably your worst nightmare. It has caves, dungeons, boss fights, and more, all to make sure that you always have something fun to do. Do you want to try blasting through the main game at Sanic speed to reach later areas? Go ahead. Do you want to meticulously clear every cave and tunnel to satisfy your crippling OCD? You do you! As you play, you can decide what equipment you want to acquire on your ultimate quest to kill God. Those choices will probably inform the order you tackle new areas and which areas you should be prioritizing. That's not to say that you don't also do this in Dark Souls 2. There's a ton of different directions you can progress through at any given time during the game. There's less choices overall, but still plenty to keep you playing. I really enjoy making a little progress in one zone, then teleporting away and making some progress in another zone. There's a lot of variety when you play the game this way, especially in the visual department. Now, let's be honest, graphically, Dark Souls 2 is pretty terrible in a lot of ways. With that said, I do appreciate some things about its direction. For one, the game has a much wider range of vivid colors than any other Souls game. Dark Souls 2 isn't afraid to have areas that are bright and cheerful from time to time. I know the Souls series isn't really known for being all sunshine and rainbows, but it's nice to feel that vibe sometimes. The other Souls games stick so closely to the direction of a sad, dead world that for me, it starts to feel like I'm living in Soviet Russia. It's just kind of boring, even if it is more consistent. And your mileage can certainly vary on this, but for me, locations like Caelid and Limgrave feel closer in aesthetics than, say, the Forest of Fallen Giants and Hade's Tower of Flame. But I'm pretty darn sure that's an ultra-spicy, unpopular take that no one is going to agree with. But one aspect I think everyone will agree on is how Dark Souls 2 does a better New Game Plus than any other game. More than anything else, Dark Souls 2's New Game Plus system might be the best argument it has for being more replayable than Elden Ring. Going into New Game Plus in most Souls games feels absolutely pointless. But in Dark Souls 2, New Game Plus is just more game to play. There's brand new content to encounter when you begin Journey 2 to Drang Lake. So even if you're a normal person who only wants to play through the game with a single character, you can take that character into New Game Plus and continue to have new experiences with them. I absolutely love this about Dark Souls 2. And it's such a shame newer Souls games didn't try to do more with this idea. Now, I realize I've been glazing Dark Souls 2 a lot in this video. With all the good things I've said about it, It seems like now it might be obvious that I think Dark Souls 2 is the more replayable game. But there's one thing I haven't brought up yet. One thing that really gives Dark Souls 2 a serious run for its money. That thing is gameplay mechanics. Elden Ring has so much more going on in terms of combat than Dark Souls 2 does. In Elden Ring, we have jumping, we have guard counters, we have Ashes of War, we have horseback combat, we have spirit summons, we have craftable consumables, we have chargeable spells, and probably more things I'm not even thinking of. The moment-to-moment gameplay of Elden Ring has so much more going on than Dark Souls 2. I think the only combat mechanic Dark Souls 2 has that Elden Ring doesn't is a more open power stance system. I honestly think this expansive list of mechanics is the main reason why I end up playing so much more Elden Ring than Dark Souls 2. Yeah, maybe in my mind Dark Souls 2 has the better variety of content, but Elden Ring has the better variety of gameplay. The reason I make so many characters is so I can engage with the game mechanics in every possible way. I want to have a defensive big man character who uses guard counters. I want to have a spell sword character who specializes in melee magic. I want a character who holds 2 giant swords and jump attacks people until they fucking die. This game's combat is so much fun, and it's turned me into a coke fiend who is desperate for another hit. When it comes down to it, I think I prefer stronger combat to anything else. The question of which game is more replayable should have already been answered before this video ever began. In reality, the whole thing was rigged from the start. I've always chosen to replay Elden Ring, not Dark Souls 2, and there's a reason for that. I like the combat more. But damn, is Dark Souls 2 some nasty competition. It does so much better than Elden Ring does. And to be honest, I probably should play it more. If nothing else, Dark Souls 2 is funny as shit, something Elden Ring could never be. If you don't believe me, watch this video I made talking about that very concept. Or you can watch something else I made. My last video was actually about a really neat hentai, so check that out if you're also a fellow gooner. And please remember to subscribe. Thank you so much for watching this video. As always, remember to stay positive and have a wonderful day, everyone.